BBC Radio 5 on 909 and 693 AM.
It's 10:40, and with the AM alternative, Johnnie Walker.
Thank you. And a very good morning to you. On the programme today, we talk to the founders of Denser, the thicko's answer to Mensa. We'll look at a new tax relief scheme for people who rent out a room in their homes. Author Richard LaPlante talks about his new book. We'll report on those nasty little habits people get up to whilst out in public. Check out Consumer News with Liz Barkley. It's Tuesday's AM Puzzle. And we have our second survival guide to Catalonia. Radio 5 with a wonderful song from James. That's called Sit Down. Liz Barkley is here. She always is on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Why are you always here on a Tuesday?
Well, I'm always here on a Tuesday with the Radio 5 Citizens Advice Bureau helpline.
Oh, of course.
And of course it's open again today as usual with trained Citizens Advice Bureau advisors waiting to take calls on anything at all to do with your rights. Just phone 0345 909 693. And the call will cost the same as a local call no matter where you're calling from in the country. And of course the details will be kept confidential. Many people actually don't know what Citizens Advice Bureau can do for them. We're there in the high street of almost all of the big towns and cities, and we're there to give information or to help with anything that's worrying you about really anything at all. We've got a huge information system, and the advisors are trained to get the information that you need from that system. Anything, for instance, from telephone bill queries to perhaps income tax, which worries a lot of people, or help with getting benefits, complaints about your bank or your building society. Anything at all, we are there to help. So phone now 0345 909 693.
Thank you, Liz. Get some consumer news from you later. Radio 5 coming up next. We look at a new organisation for planks. It's their answer to Mensa, and they're calling it Denser. The producer of the programme is already enrolled. J-O-H-N. J-O-H-N, yeah.
Okay, I've written down my own little way.
Okay. So
I
you
should be
can
right.
remember it now.
I think I should be able to.
Okay.
Armageddon.
Oh, the long version is J-O-H-N-N-I-E, but that would be a bit too tough.
I've done the traditional version, J-O-H-N-N-Y, actually.
Oh, right. Sorry, we're on the air. The record's ended. That was the Mock Turtles. Can you dig it? Now, if you're fed up with being told by so-called experts what to do, what to think, what's important, what films to watch, or what books you should read, if your IQ nearer 100 than 140, and you would like to join in the battle against everything pompous and pretentious, then forget Mensa. Denser is the organisation for you. 3 members of that organisation are with us in the studio, including the main man, the leader, Mr. Armageddon. I call you R or Mr. Geddon or Armageddon, I suppose.
Arma. I think Arma's the best.
Arma, yeah.
Arma.
Arma for friends. Arma for friends.
Arma.
And Claire is here, and also George. Good morning, George.
Good morning, John.
Are you a sort of honorary member of this organisation?
One of the founder members.
And whose idea was it, Arma?
Well, it was my idea. I must be guilty. I was the person that dreamt it up in a pipe dream once. I was smoking a pipe, and this came into my mind. And the main reason was that we didn't know how to program our video. None of us can work out how to handle high-tech, high fidelity.
High fidelity, high tech.
Anxiety.
High density.
High density. So we said, we'll have to do something about this, try to get it across to manufacturers. We didn't know how to operate any of this stuff. Also, that I was sad to listen to people who are very intelligent people around Hampstead, but they were all very unhappy because they weren't clever enough. Or they thought they weren't clever enough, and they all kept arguing with each other as to who was the cleverest. And I thought these people need somebody to
encourage them,
to tell them not to worry too much about it, that the rest of us seem to manage quite happily without worrying about it.
Is it okay to be thick, then, sort of?
Oh yes, it's an advantage.
It helps.
Yep.
It's not only okay, it's really more than anything a way of being. It's like existentialism, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. It's
You're
really...
not supposed to know a word like that, were you?
Existentialism?
Yeah.
No, I mean, no,
Where did she get that
What's
from, Mama?
suspicious
It
of
was
her?
off the toilet
Well,
roll.
No,
down on the
we
BBC.
think she may be infiltrating the movement.
No,
Claire, yes.
I would
I
say
think
more than
she's
anything,
a
I mean,
spy.
if I can speak for myself, if
She
you don't
sounds
mind.
like an intelligent Sloane to me, and I don't think she should be in the club.
I beg your pardon.
She's a spy.
Matter
No, I mean,
Harry.
Yeah, all right, I'll keep the quiet.
If I can just say that really, I mean, what Armour is saying is true, but really, denser or densitis, whatever you might want to call it, however you might want to spell it, Johnny?
John,
Thank
either
you,
one will
John,
do.
either one will do, thanks. Is really more than anything a way of life. I mean, I first discovered, that's why I said existentialism. It's really a question of being, you don't have to join any club or anything, you either are or you aren't dense, really. I mean, I think I knew it. It's something which I knew for most of my life, but I really discovered it, I think, when I did my cookery O-level and had to ask the examiner how to use the can opener.
And then you recovered.
And really, it's
Yeah.
so belonging to an organisation like Denser really puts a form to that which you already knew was there, if you follow me.
I don't think she should be in, George, personally.
Well, I think she should. I think there's
It
a lot
helps
of
if you can
people the
waffle.
same
I mean,
sort of
it's
thing. Another thing, you've got critics who write in the newspapers on various films how they slag it off and say it's a terrible film, and then when you go and see it yourself, it's a fantastic film and box office hit. And this has happened many, many times before.
So how many members do you have now, Armour?
Well, we've got almost 600, but we've only been keeping a low profile so far. Now we're out of the cupboard. Are we out of the cupboard?
I think so, yeah.
We take our sunglasses
I feel it,
off
I
now.
feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it in an existentialist kind of way. Yeah. I mean,
Transcendental.
She's been
Transcendental meditation.
transcendental, really. I mean,
Transcendental.
it's really got a cosmic kind of purpose.
You've been
to it,
listening to
behind
Jimmy
it.
Greaves.
What's your advice, though? I mean, don't you get some useful advice if you become a member of
Oh,
Denser?
indeed.
Like what you do with your video machine when you can't program it?
Well, no, what you do is you go out and you
Have a
go to a
pint.
cinema and you see I think there's a film called The Violence of the Rams. You go and see The Violence of the Rams. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds familiar vaguely.
Yeah.
vaguely.
Yeah.
Not
And then
being
you
cheap,
try
but
not to
first
worry
rings a
about it,
bell.
not being cheap. Then you have some thick chocolate or gooseberry fool, some food for thought, something that will really take your mind off it, make you feel a
Into
bit
a
happier
dense
about
kind of
it.
state of being, really.
Oh, here we go again. A
I mean, I
transcendental
feel,
state of being,
I think the dense state of being is really what it's all about. It's
Right.
being there
She was a-
in the
You go
moment.
and see
in
Dumbo.
a
You go and
dense
see
kind of
Dumbo,
way.
and then you feel much, much better.
She's a cook, right, and she
Yeah.
uses the high-density pastry and all this.
So tell me, do you have sort of regular meetings? Do you have sort of monthly meetings, or what?
For the London members, yes. The other people out there in the country, in the shires, especially down in Cornwall and up in the oil rigs, they're a wee bit shy about revealing themselves.
And the poor guy in prison.
And they'll have a member who is a guest of Her Majesty at the moment, so we can't
made him
expect
one
much of
remember.
him.
And what do you, I've got a little badge. What else do you get when you become a member? Is there a sort of membership kit? Or?
A feeling of belonging, really, more than
No,
anything.
there's plenty. You get your membership badge, you get your membership certificate, you get your wallet, you get your membership.
What's in the wallet?
Oh, on the wallet. Oh, the wallet's a surprise. And then you get the most impressive of all, invented by my friend here, the lead-free pencil, the unleaded pencil, because we're environment friendly. And my friend George can tell you more about that, why.
Yes, I invented the lead-free pencil. It's called the Densil. It doesn't write, there's no lead in it, but I think it's the thing of the future.
And as soon as you feel like writing something angry, you use the lead-free pencil, and then nothing comes out, and then you feel better again. The whole
Have
point
you-
is to...
Sorry, the whole
Oh,
point
you
is...
forgot to mention you get a T-shirt with the pack.
Oh, well, yeah, there's a T-shirt comes too. You get a T-shirt when you become a member.
Do you have any political ambitions? I mean, I would have thought you could have formed an alliance with
Cosmic
Screaming Lord
domination.
Such, perhaps. Or...
We did think about that.
No, they
know, we
approached
did
us,
think
but we thought, no, we're
We'll take
pure.
one step backwards.
We're pure. We're pure.
We had some good ideas, but...
We had a candidate, but he forgot what day polling day was, so he didn't turn up. This was at Hampstead. I don't know where he went, but...
And Claire,
Down
can,
the pub,
next
down the
time.
pub, probably.
Claire, can anyone join, or do you need special qualifications?
No, this is what I was trying to get across earlier on, but no one was really listening to me, which is not an unusual state, I have to admit. It's really a question of an inner knowing, and once you actually know that, then somebody else will just come along. It's like recognizing a kindred spirit, more than anything, really. You don't have to really, I mean, you have to formally apply, but you won't get in unless Armour, when he receives your application form, feels kind of
You're
cosmic
right.
vibes that this is a natural density.
And this will come through
I'm
the
sorry, not
left
everyone
and
can
right, yeah.
join. Not everyone can. Not everyone is born with the right kind of depth of denseness.
We make it look
Johnny,
easy, but
sorry.
it's not as easy as it looks.
It's not. It's quite hard, really.
I would imagine Mensa are quite worried about all this, really, this rival organisation.
Mensa, I've heard of them.
It's an Italian dining room.
Mensa,
isn't
is
it?
it?
It rings a bell.
No, I haven't.
I went to one in Bologna
come.
University.
Mensa.
I think it's a
I've heard
dining
of
room.
them.
I don't know.
Is it
I don't
some
know.
military organisation?
Mensa.
George,
CIA, yeah.
what's your trade? You look like a cab driver to me. You?
I was ex-bodyguard, actually.
Yeah, ex-bodyguard.
Yeah. For
Name that
personal-
group.
For groups and things, you know.
There's a denser mind in it.
And what has being a member of Densa brought to your life?
Happiness. I feel relieved and relaxed and having good fun. It's great.
You don't have to worry anymore about not having read books such as Who the Bell Tolls For. We haven't read Who the Bell Tolls For, have you?
No, I don't know. No.
Do you know there's a story about Peter Sellers, who didn't have a very good education, but certainly in the arts and things, and he would be at a sort of very posh dinner party and then start talking about modern art or something like this, and he'd excuse himself. Sorry, I must just leave the room for a moment. He'd go and call up this bookish friend of his and says, I'm talking about so-and-so. Can you give me a good question to ask or a good comment to make? So he could go back to the table and appear to be educated and be able to partake in the conversation. What a shame he's popped his clogs. But this would have been an ideal club for him to join, wouldn't it?
Yeah, a kind of a help service. Yeah, we can do that. You're permanently, say, tuned into us on an earphone. And then any doubts you have when you're in such companies in Hampstead or somewhere, you just get on to us and we can answer. We can supply any answer to anything. Really.
If you have trouble with your crossword puzzles, we could times and things.
Basically, really, Johnny, we really want to help people who are aware of their density, but feel they've got nowhere to go. They need help. People need help. Dense people need help. I mean, and I'm just so glad that I've,
Did you take A levels, Claire?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got some A levels,
sorry.
haven't you?
I have actually.
How many have you got?
10.
10.
Have you?
I have. I'm sorry, I'm
Definitely is.
I'm sorry, I think I'll have to reconsider your membership.
But I've still got an innate density. Ask my sister, in fact, who first named me, actually, denser. So I've really found where I belong.
Well, anybody who couldn't use the chin over on the wall, I mean to say, the 10 O level.
But I did pass the cookery O level.
Well, Lord Smith of High Barnet, he did suspect you at the very beginning. I haven't told you about him. He's a...
We'll talk about this not on air,
anyway,
Bill, okay, later.
I thought you wanted me to give an address out.
So you got O level
members, but unfortunately you've probably forgotten it.
Oh, I have forgotten. What is our address? That's it, yeah.
Well, we did forget it, but it's written down.
All right, we'll give the address out a little bit later on. In the meantime, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, John.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, John.
And don't forget to stamp this envelope. Yeah.
Okay, and thank you, Armageddon. Coming up later on, that's members of Densa. Later on, Richard LaPlante talks about his new book. We also look at a new tax relief scheme for people who rent out a room in their homes. It's the government's plan to help the homeless. Will it work? We'll talk about that later on. We also have the latest consumer news with Liz Barkley and Tuesday's AM Puzzle, all on BBC Radio 5, 909 and 693. 11 o'clock, news and sport now with Alice Marston and Andy Kay.
The beleaguered residents of the Bosnian capital, Sarajevo, are awaiting the arrival of hundreds of Canadian UN troops who are making their way to secure the city's airport. Serb fighters have withdrawn, and the airport is now under the control of just 34 UN soldiers. When it arrives, the peacekeeping force will help distribute vital supplies to the hundreds of thousands of people trapped during the 3-month siege. Profits at the industrial conglomerate Lonrho have slumped by more than a half. In the 6 months to the end of March, the company made £38 million, down from £109 million during the same period the previous year. The group's chief executive, Tiny Rowland, blamed the low price of platinum in Lonrho's key mining businesses. He said he believed the second half of the year would see much improvement. An aerospace company is spending more than £20 million to create 300 jobs in Derbyshire. Chrome Alloy UK specialises in reconditioning the blades of aeroplane engines. The firm is starting a new venture, coating the blades with a special formula which will extend their life and save engine makers money. Doctors have called for pop stars and personalities to encourage children not to smoke. In a report, the Royal College of Physicians warns that 450 children start smoking every day and 300 adults die of smoking-related diseases. The report says parents, teachers, pop stars and media personalities must set an example to children so that they stop believing it's clever to smoke. A group of Labour MPs has claimed that parts of Scotland have begun to look like the Wild West, with street shootouts between gangs fighting to control the supply of drugs. They've tabled a Commons motion calling for government action to stamp out drug dealing. They want emergency funding to eradicate what they call this evil trade. A Conservative MP says people who have tattoos should be compelled by law to take out an insurance policy at the same time to pay for their removal. Teresa Gorman from Billericay is to introduce a bill in the Commons to ensure the cost of removing tattoos isn't borne by the NHS.
It's women's quarter-finals day at the All England Tennis Championships at Wimbledon. First on centre court, it's Monica Seles versus Natalie Tauzier, while on number one court, the oldest player in the last eight, Martina Navratilova, meets Katerina Maleva. Well, Martina may have experience on her side, but she says the youngsters have a greater advantage.
I always get tickled when the announcers say, oh, it's amazing, this rookie with so much pressure on him or her, and they handled it so well. You don't know what pressure is when you're a rookie or a freshman or whatever. In any sport, it's much more difficult when you've been around for a while and you know what everything means.
Well, one of those fresh-faced players, although not exactly a rookie, is 16-year-old Jennifer Capriati.
It's always been fun. Just think, though, after a year, it becomes more like a job. I mean, it's still fun, but, you know, in the beginning it's new and you don't know what to expect, and then after, you know, you get used to it, and it's just, you know, what you have to go out and do.
And the young American faces the third seed Gabriela Sabatini. Defending champion Steffi Graf plays in the other quarter-final. She meets the only unseeded player left in the women's draw, Natalia Zvereva of the CIS. Full coverage here on Radio 5 from 1:30. On to Rugby League, and Great Britain are playing their last warm-up game ahead of Friday's third and deciding test against Australia. The Tourists are up against Gold Coast in New South Wales. The match is around 25 minutes old, and with the latest news, here's Harry Gratian.
12 minutes to go before half-time, and Great Britain and the Gold Coast are 4 points each. Great Britain got off to a good start, actually, when Gary Connolly scored a try after some fine work from Derek Fox and Kevin Ellis, and that might have suggested a convincing Great Britain performance. Anything but. Within 8 minutes, Ray Herring had scored a try for the Gold Coast to make it 4-all, and then a fairly torrid 20 minutes or so followed for Great Britain when they dropped the ball half a dozen times inside their own 25. They're coming back into the game now, possibly because it's raining, a bit more like English weather. But here, with around about 12 minutes to go before half-time, it's 4 points each.
Harry Gratian reporting from New South Wales. And don't forget, Radio 5 will have live commentary on the all-important third test from 10:40 on Friday morning.
Radio 5 News and Sport from the BBC. It's 4 minutes past 11.
As the sports station prepares to bring you more live tennis action, here's Radio 5's Wimbledon update from Ron Jones.
Into the quarter-finals we go. Lots of glory for Jeremy Bates yesterday, but no further British involvement now in the singles. Today, it's the ladies who take centre stage, or indeed centre court. First on this afternoon will be the number one seed, Monica Seles, against Natalie Tauzier of France. Then, before Jennifer Capriati plays Gabriela Sabatini, Boris Becker and Wayne Ferreira finish their match held over from last night. On number one court, Martina Navratilova, with a 10th title in sight, takes on Katerina Malieva. Then Steffi Graf, the defending champion, meets Natalie Zvereva.
Follow today's action on the sports station, Radio 5, live from Wimbledon, from 1:30.
At the moment, you're with the Tuesday edition of the AM Alternative. Johnnie Walker here, welcoming in Graham Linden for our Tuesday AM Alternative puzzle. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. I don't know if I can do it because I've just been made an honorary member of DENSA.
I was thinking of getting you in to sort of set the puzzle while they were here, but I thought it would be utter complete.
They've already solved it.
Bad enough as it was. Right, now, how's it work this week?
Okay, as it's Independence Day on July the 4th, today's AM Alternative quiz has an American flavour to it. I'll be asking you 3 general knowledge questions spread out throughout today's show. Each of the 3 answers containing the letters AM, as in AM Alternative, somewhere within them. For example, if I asked you for the AM that is a city in Florida, very popular as a tourist resort, the answer would be Miami. As you solve each clue, make a note of the last letter of the solution so that when you have the 3 answers, you'll have the 3 letters. Finally, add the letters A and M to those 3 letters and rearrange all 5 letters to form the name of an American city near Boston. When you have the name of that city, you can phone in straight away because that's the prize answer.
Right. You've got to wait for the third clue before you call in. We don't want any clever...
Yeah, we had people phoning in last week after the first one. But not today.
Okay, so clue number 1 again is what?
Clue number 1. Which English county is also a new state of the USA?
Okay, which English county is also a new state of the USA? Get the word and take the last letter from that word. And there'll be clues number 2 and 3 coming up later on in the program. Next, we hear about a new government tax relief scheme to benefit people thinking of renting out a room in their house, which they hope will offer help to the homeless. We'll find out more from Paul Soper. BBC Radio 5, Johnnie Walker with you on the AM Alternative. Crystal Waters and Gypsy Woman, La-Da-Dee, Dee-Dee-Dee and all of that. It's 10 minutes after 11. And a reminder that the phone lines today are being staffed by trained advisors from the CAB. If you've got any problem at all that you think they might be able to help you with, in complete confidence, give them a call. The cost to you will be the same as if you're making a local call. You needn't give your name if you don't want to. The number to ring, 0345 909 693. And those trained advisors on the other end of that phone number until 12:30 today, as they are every Tuesday. Now, on to housing. 10 days ago, the government announced a new scheme of tax relief for people who rent out a room in their own homes. The rent-a-room scheme is aimed at encouraging people to rent out rooms and therefore make more accommodation available for the homeless. Paul Soper is with me in the studio to outline exactly how this works.
Yes, Johnny. It's, as you said, a new scheme. It's actually going to apply for the current tax year onwards, so we don't have to wait until next April for this relief to be introduced. If you receive rent from a room or a number of rooms that you let out on a furnished basis. Now, it must be furnished. If you let out a room as a self-contained unit with no furniture in it, you won't get the relief at all. It must be a furnished letting in your own home. It must be your only or main residence for the year. You can receive rent of up to £3,250, just over £60 a week, completely tax-free. If the rent that you receive is more than £3,250, you've got a choice. You can either pay tax on the excess. So if you got rent, say £3,500, you could pay tax on £250, or you could calculate under the existing rules the amount of the profit that you make from the letting. In other words, deduct your expenses. What you can't get is both the rent-a-room relief, as they're going to call it, rather snappy name, and expenses as well. But you can choose between the two.
So in a way, they're hoping, I suppose, there's a double benefit. A, there will be more rooms available for homeless people, and B, there will be it'll make it easier for people who are struggling to pay their mortgage.
I think there may well be three reasons, actually. One, the published aim, helping the homeless, and it may go some way towards doing that. It's very difficult, from a tax point of view, to actually comment on that. Secondly, to give help, obviously, for people who are struggling with a mortgage. But, of course, the problem there is that you've got to be very careful with the way that you let the property out, because quite often the person who's provided you with a mortgage loan is not going to be terrifically happy about your letting. But if it is on a furnished basis, if you're taking in somebody who's a lodger, then normally the building society should not be particularly concerned about that. The third reason, though, from the revenues point of view, is that this is one of these sources of income that's very often abused. People receive rent from letting out a room in their home, and they don't declare it, so potentially they're getting into trouble with the Inland Revenue. By giving them a reasonable allowance and saying, yes, you can let out, you can receive up to £3,250 a year without incurring a tax liability on it, it actually means that the revenue don't then have to worry about that group of people. And it's rather ironic that they announced this at exactly the same time that some members of the Inland Revenue were scouring Wimbledon trying to track down people who are letting out rooms in their home to people who come to see the tennis tournament.
All right, well, the number one aim, as you mentioned, is to help the homeless. Let's see what Shelter's view of that is. Jessica Morris is on the line from Shelter. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning.
Do you welcome this new scheme?
Yes, Shelter does welcome it, and we think it will help some people, but we are anxious that people look at it in the right perspective, and sadly we don't think it's going to tackle the homelessness crisis in anything like the scale that's needed. Shelter's identified an emergency need for 100,000 additional affordable homes every year over the next 5 years. That's just to keep a lid on the current crisis. And as Paul pointed out, we are talking about furnished units. Now, many of the homeless people that we're seeing are families, and families aren't going to find this scheme of much use to them. I think we're also slightly concerned about the element of the scheme helping those people with mortgage problems. Yes, it could help many people. Shelter's seeing an awful lot of people in problems with their mortgage, but we're also seeing a lot of tenants who've suddenly found the bailiffs arriving one day because their landlord has defaulted on the mortgage and the house is about to be repossessed. So we're a little bit concerned about that as well. The main point is that this isn't going to tackle the homelessness crisis, and while we welcome it, we'd like to see a much greater level of investment in affordable housing, really as a matter of emergency.
And then this presumably, you mean, a sort of new council housing?
Well, we're not so concerned at who provides the social housing. It could be local authorities, or it could also be housing associations. What we are concerned about is that there are record numbers of people who just don't have anywhere to live at the moment. And because local authorities don't have enough housing, they're having to put homeless families too often in temporary accommodation. Now, that can mean unsatisfactory bed and breakfast hotels or mobile homes in caravan sites, often very far from the nearest town or village. And there's more than 60,000 households who are currently stacked up in temporary accommodation, very, very expensive and costly in human terms too. So our housing system at the moment is failing too many people on low incomes or unemployed, and there really is an urgent need to tackle this big gap of social housing.
All right, Jessica, thank you for joining us today. Jessica Morris from the housing charity Shelter. So that's their thoughts. But for the people it is targeted at, the single homeless, and again, we mentioned people who are having problems meeting their monthly mortgage payments, this seems like a good scheme. What about the snags, though, Paul? You mentioned the fact that the lender, the bank or the building society, might not be happy about this scheme. Presumably the government, though, would have sought their would have consulted them, would they not, before they came in with it?
It's possible that they might have consulted with the building societies. Frankly, though, I'd be surprised if they had, because when you're introducing a new relief like this, the manner in which the government likes to introduce it is that it achieves the maximum publicity. And you don't really get that by leaking it, by talking to the building societies in advance. But there are other drawbacks too. One drawback is the question of insurance. You might actually find that insurance on the contents of your home is going to be substantially more expensive if you've got lodgers in the house as well. The insurance company may perceive that to be a risk, and in a very extreme case, an insurance company, for example, if you were burgled, might argue that if you hadn't told them about the existence of the lodger, that you'd actually broken the uberime fidei requirement that they call utmost good faith. In other words, you've got to disclose everything to your insurance company, otherwise they can simply wash their hands of the liability. That's a further drawback that may need to be taken into account by somebody who's looking at this. One tax drawback that people might be worried about is what happens with capital gains tax, because it's all very well saying, yes, you can receive rent of up to $3,250 tax-free. But what happens when you sell the house later? Will that also incur a liability? In fact, here there's a much older relief, this goes back some 12 years now, which says that if you do let out part of your only or main residence, then for capital gains tax purposes, you can actually make a capital gain of up to £40,000 without having to pay tax on it either. So in fact, that part of the worry has already been taken care of. So from a tax point of view, it works well for somebody who's thinking of maybe using their home to generate extra income. We mentioned one group, people in difficulty with mortgages. Another group might well be the elderly. If they've got a house that's larger than their requirements, by taking in students, for example, they'll get this relief as well. It's not simply aimed at the homeless. It doesn't have to be a homeless person that you take in. It's anybody to whom you let on a furnished basis. They could also find it a useful boost to their income.
If you rent out a room in your house to someone who's claiming benefit, would they, some of their payments, go straight to you, the landlord?
So there are arrangements now which can allow payments to be made directly under those circumstances. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure necessarily that the person who's going to be letting out the house would be concerned with that particular problem when they actually make the letting. I rather suspect that the vast majority of people here are not going to be saying, OK, let's deliberately look for somebody who is A, homeless, and B, is on income support and so on. I think they're going to be looking for, if you like, the normal, respectable tenant, somebody who's got a job, somebody who's got income. And I fear this is where perhaps the scheme may well fail the homeless, because all too often they don't have those resources. And the ordinary householder is not necessarily going to be conscious of the fact that the payment of the rent can be guaranteed. Perhaps some extra publicity along this line would be very useful indeed. You know, if, for example, a homeless person could actually take a leaflet to a landlord and say, well, look, you know, you don't need to worry about the payment of the rent aspect, because that will be taken care of by X. It's just one further refinement, perhaps, which could be added to make it more acceptable. But at the moment, great from a tax point of view, no two ways about it. From a social point of view, I think there's a question mark.
All right, Paul, many thanks for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Radio 5, it's 11:20.
Radio 5 brings you the most fun over breakfast.
Well, not only has he sent you through with a Mission Impossible answer, I'm not running a TV team at the moment.
Better company through your morning.
Okay, it was lovely to talk to you.
Oh, it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, look at you see, and I can talk because you smile nicely.
You're chatting me up, aren't you?
A first-class service. Wimbledon, live on 5. Sound stories in the evening.
Joe stroked the little body very gently, and the kitten stirred and rasped his hand feebly with a rough tongue.
And with a big noise at night.
Radio 5's Loud from 10:10 till midnight every night.
The Long Days of Summer on BBC Radio 5.
Radio 5 with Tom Robinson, War Baby, 11:25 the time. We're back at Wimbledon with John Inverdale and the gang at 1:30 this afternoon for coverage all afternoon of the happenings there. Our AM alternative quiz is up and running. Clue number 1 is already gone. On offer will be to the first 3 callers with the correct answer, a huge bundle of puzzle magazines. With clue number 2, Graham Linden is here. He's left his broom outside. I understand when you got home last week, there's a broom waiting for you.
Yeah, well, not actually home, at the office. They had a broom waiting for me, seeing as you told them I swept up outside in between clues. Thank you very much.
That's all right, anytime. Clue number 2.
Right. What is the first name of the American film producer whose surname is Goldwyn? We're looking for the full 6-letter name here, not the shortened version of it. So that's the first name of the American film producer whose surname is Goldwyn.